Hey there, gearheads! Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about one of the most stunning automotive failures in American history. A car so beautiful, so innovative, that only 26 were ever built. A car that cost more than a Cadillac, yet rode on the bones of a budget compact that was killing its maker. A car designed by a yoga-practicing, motorcycle-riding engineer who'd rather discuss Eastern philosophy than sales figures. This is the story of the 1954 Hudson Italia, the gorgeous swan song of a dying company, and quite possibly the most spectacular miscalculation in Detroit history. The Golden Age and the Fall. To understand the Italia, you need to understand what Hudson was before everything went sideways. Hudson Motor Car Company wasn't always struggling. Founded in Detroit back in 1909, they were innovators from day one. In their first year of production, Hudson had the best production numbers in automotive industry history. By 1929, they'd climbed to become America's third-largest automaker, right behind Ford and Chevrolet. 300,000 cars rolling out of their factories. That wasn't just success, that was dominance. Hudson gave the industry some real engineering breakthroughs, too. They pioneered dual brakes, dashboard warning lights for oil pressure and generators, and the balanced crankshaft. That last one was huge. It allowed their straight-six engine, the legendary Super 6, to rev higher and smoother than anything else on the road at the time. These weren't just cars. They were technological statements. Then came 1948, and Hudson released something truly revolutionary: the step-down design. Picture this. While other manufacturers were still building cars with high centers of gravity, Hudson dropped the passenger floor between the frame rails. You literally step down into the car. The result was a vehicle that sat lower, handled better, and looked sleeker than anything else on American roads. The construction was unitized, incredibly solid, and rattle-free. It was years ahead of its time. In 1951, Hudson introduced the Hornet, powered by a 308 cubic inch flathead 6, the largest mass-produced inline-six for passenger cars at the time. With 145 horsepower initially, upgraded to 170 by 1954, this engine could match or beat many V8s of the era. NASCAR drivers immediately recognized what Hudson had created. From 1951 to 1954, the fabulous Hudson Hornet absolutely dominated stock car racing. They won 66 out of 108 NASCAR races. Let that sink in. A six-cylinder car was embarrassing the V8 competition on the track week after week. But here's the cruel reality of the American automobile industry. Racing success doesn't always translate to showroom sales. By 1951, total Hudson production hit nearly 132,000 units. Just 2 years later, in 1953, that number had collapsed to about 45,000. What happened? Several things, and they all hit at once. First, the step-down design that had seemed so innovative in 1948 was looking dated by 1953. The unitized construction that made the car so solid also made it expensive and difficult to restyle. Detroit was moving to annual model changes, and Hudson couldn't keep up without breaking the bank. Second, America was falling in love with V8 engines. It didn't matter that Hudson's Big Six could outperform many V8s. Buyers wanted 8 cylinders under the hood. It was a status symbol, a fashion statement. Hudson's refusal to develop a V8 hurt them badly. Third, and perhaps most importantly, Hudson was an independent facing off against the Big Three: General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. These giants had economies of scale Hudson couldn't match. They could afford to slash prices, offer attractive financing, and still make money. Hudson couldn't. The company that had once been third in the nation was hemorrhaging cash and running out of options. The Jet. A desperate gamble. In 1953, Hudson's 63-year-old president, A.E. Barrett, faced an impossible choice. He had just enough capital to do one thing: Either develop a modern overhead valve V8 and redesign the aging Hornet to compete directly with the big three, or create an all-new compact car to compete in a market segment the big boys were mostly ignoring. Barrett chose the compact. It was called the Hudson Jet, and it was a disaster. The Jet itself wasn't a bad car, really. It featured unibody construction, seated 5 adults comfortably, and with its 202 cubic inch 6-cylinder engine making 114 horsepower with twin H-power and overdrive, it could hit 60 mph in under 15 seconds and return 25 miles per gallon. Not spectacular, but certainly competent. The problem was everything else. First, the styling. Barrett insisted on a high roofline so passengers could wear hats comfortably. He wanted chair-high seating and full-size car amenities in a compact package. The result looked awkward and ungainly, like someone had tried to shrink a full-size car but forgot to shrink everything proportionally. Hudson stylists had pushed for something lower and sleeker, but Barrett wouldn't budge. Then there was the price. The base 1953 Jet cost $1,158. A full-sized Chevrolet started at $1,613. A full-sized Ford was $1,634. Think about that. Hudson was asking buyers to pay more for a smaller car with less prestige than a full-size Chevy or Ford. In a market where dealers were slashing prices in a savage price war, that $200 to $300 gap could easily become $500 or more. The development costs were crushing. Hudson spent $16 million, their last cash reserves, bringing the Jet to market. They'd projected sales of over 100,000 units annually. In 1953, they sold 21,143. In 1954, just 14,224. Total production, 35,367 units. The Jet didn't save Hudson, it accelerated the company's death. By the end of 1953, Hudson had lost $10.4 million, their biggest loss in history. The writing was on the wall. Hudson Motor Car Company was finished as an independent manufacturer. Frank Spring, the unconventional designer. Now, let me tell you about the man behind the Italia, because Frank Spring was unlike any other automotive designer in Detroit. Born into a wealthy California family, Spring earned his mechanical engineering degree from École Polytechnique in Paris in 1914. After serving with the U.S. Army Signal Corps during the World War I, where he developed a lifelong passion for aircraft, motorcycles, and machinery, he became an automotive engineer. In the early 1920s, Spring joined the Walter M. Murphy Coach Building Company in Pasadena as an efficiency manager, eventually becoming general manager. In 1931, he moved to Hudson as their first in-house styling chief, a position he'd hold for over 2 decades. But Spring wasn't your typical Detroit executive. While his contemporaries wore conservative suits and talked quarterly earnings, Spring practiced yoga, followed a vegetarian diet, studied Asian philosophies, and rode motorcycles. His personal garage included Mercedes Gull Wings, Beechcraft Staggerwing aircraft, and Vincent and Ariel motorcycles. He was more interested in elegant solutions and innovative constructions than in following corporate orthodoxy. According to those who worked with him, Spring wasn't a hands-on designer who drew sketches himself. Instead, he set the direction and supervised his small design team. He had a particular fascination with European sports cars and racing vehicles, keeping a collection of pre-war European brochures that influenced his thinking. The Czechoslovakian Tatra T87, a streamlined rear-engine marvel, was a particular favorite. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, Spring's designs kept Hudson competitive without being revolutionary. He understood that Hudson's conservative president, A.E. Barrett, insisted on high roof lines and traditional proportions. But Spring never stopped pushing for something more daring. The step-down design of 1948 was Spring's greatest triumph. He'd finally convinced Barrett to take a risk and it had paid off with a car that was truly innovative. But by 1953, with the jet failing and the step-down looking dated, Spring knew Hudson needed something dramatic to capture attention. He had one more idea, one last roll of the dice. He'd create a sports car that would showcase what Hudson could be. The Italia, birth of a dream. In the summer of 1953, with Hudson's financial situation growing more desperate, Spring pitched an audacious concept. He wanted to build a limited production sports car using jet mechanicals, but with a completely redesigned body created by one of Italy's premier coach builders. The inspiration came from watching Chrysler receive enormous publicity from their collaborations with Italian design house Ghia. Spring wanted to replicate that success for Hudson. If they couldn't afford to redesign their entire lineup, they could at least create a halo car that would generate headlines and bring customers into showrooms. Spring turned to Carrozzeria Touring of Milan, working directly with Carlo Felice Bianchi Anderloni. Touring was famous for their superleggera construction technique, light tubular frames covered with hand-formed aluminum panels. It was the same method used on some of the most beautiful cars in the world. Hudson sent a jet chassis to Italy. The reported cost for the prototype was just $28,000, a bargain for something so ambitious. What emerged from Touring's workshops was breathtaking. The Italia stood 9 inches lower than the jet, with a dramatically raked roofline that gave it a sleek, purposeful stance. Up front, large V-shaped air scoops sat above the headlights, suggesting performance even if they primarily ventilated just the fender tops. The front bumper featured a bold inverted V that Hudson's marketing called the praying mantis design. The doors were cut 14 inches into the roof, aircraft-style doors that made entry and exit easier in such a low car. The wraparound windshield echoed the 1953 Corvette's design, reinforcing the Italia's modern, sporty character. But the real drama was out back. 3 chrome tubes emerged from each rear fender in a triple-stacked arrangement, each housing taillights, brake lights, and backup lights. These were designed to look like jet exhaust pipes, capturing the aerospace enthusiasm of the era. Love them or hate them, and opinion was divided even then. They were unforgettable. Inside, the Italia was just as special. The anatomically correct front bucket seats were adjustable for rake and position, with separate cushions of varying density for optimal support. They swiveled outward when the doors opened, making entry easier. Red leather upholstery, red carpeting, and red metal dash accented an interior that felt more European Grand Tourer than American compact. Even a radio came standard. The exterior was finished in what Hudson called Italian cream, a rich vanilla shade that looked expensive and elegant. Under that beautiful aluminum skin, however, was pure Hudson jet, a 202 cubic inch flathead 6 with dual carburetors and an export cylinder head, making just 114 horsepower. Paired with a column-mounted 3-speed manual transmission with overdrive, the Italia could crack 100 mph, but it wasn't going to win any races. This was a Grand Tourer, not a sports car, despite its looks. In September 1953, Frank and Clara Spring picked up the prototype Italia from Touring's Milan workshops and drove it through Italy before shipping it back to the United States. The car toured dealerships and auto shows across America and Europe, including the International Sports Car Show in January 1954. The public reaction was largely positive. Here was proof that American manufacturers could create something as stylish and innovative as anything from Europe. Hudson announced plans to build 25 production examples with an eventual goal of 50 cars. Hudson sent firm orders on September 23, 1953, telling dealers the price, $4,800, FOB Detroit. Some sources listed at $4,350 at the port of entry in New York. Either way, it was expensive. A 1954 Cadillac Coupe de Ville started at $3,995. The Nash Healey cost $4,921. The Kaiser Darren was $3,668. The Chevrolet Corvette was $3,523. Hudson was asking buyers to pay Cadillac money for a car built on compact economy car mechanicals, powered by a modest 6-cylinder engine, making barely over 100 horsepower. The merger and the end. On January 14, 1954, just 4 months after Hudson began taking Italia orders, the bombshell dropped. Hudson Motor Car Company and Nash Kelvinator Corporation announced they would merge to form American Motors Corporation. At the time, it was the largest corporate merger in U.S. history. For Hudson, it was the end. The merger was effective May 1, 1954. Hudson's Detroit factory would be converted to military contract production. All future Hudson passenger cars would be built in the Nash plant in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And they'd be based on Nash platforms with Hudson badges and trim. The Italia was immediately doomed. Nash's management had absolutely no interest in an expensive, hand-built sports car that lost money on every sale. By this point, a batch of 25 jet chassis had already been shipped to Italy and were being fitted with Italia bodies by Touring and their subcontractor Zavatarelli, who assembled the mechanicals. Those 25 cars, plus the single prototype, became the entire production run. 6 cars apparently remained in Europe, never making it back to America. Of the 19 or so that returned to the United States, sales were glacial. Roy D. Chapin Jr., who was serving as sales manager for the Italia program, received a simple order from the new management at AMC. Get rid of those cars. Most Italias were eventually sold to eccentric customers in Southern California, people who appreciated the car's uniqueness enough to overlook its hefty price tag and humble underpinnings. One buyer was Trevor James Constable, who purchased serial number 24 and later modified it extensively. Frank Spring did produce one more Italia variant, a 4-door sedan prototype called the X161, based not on the Jet, but on the full-size Hornet platform. It was larger, more powerful, and more subdued in its styling. But with Hudson now part of AMC, there was no future for this design either. The Italia received mixed reviews. Automotive journalists praised its styling ambition, but questioned the combination of exotic coachwork and pedestrian mechanicals. Some found the jet pipe taillights gimmicky. Others noted that the tubular frame construction, while lightweight, lacked rigidity, with particular weakness in the cowl and midsection. But the real problem wasn't the car itself. The real problem was timing. By the time the first production Italias were being delivered in late 1954, they were orphan cars from a defunct manufacturer. Hudson still existed as a brand under AMC, but everyone knew it was living on borrowed time. Nobody wanted to buy an expensive specialty car from a company that might not be around to support it. The Hudson name would survive until 1957, applied to rebadged Nash models that bore no resemblance to the great Hudsons of the past. Then it disappeared entirely, along with Nash, as AMC consolidated around the Rambler nameplate. Why America said no. So why did America reject the Italia? Why did this beautiful car fail so completely? First, the price. At $4,800, the Italia cost 20% more than a Cadillac. Buyers at that price point wanted luxury, power, and prestige. The Italia offered style and exclusivity, but it couldn't compete with Cadillac's 331 cubic inch V8, sumptuous interior, and the social status that came with that badge. Second, the mechanicals. No matter how beautiful the bodywork, buyers knew they were getting jet running gear. That meant a small flathead six-cylinder engine in an era obsessed with V8s and a chassis from a failed economy car. The performance simply didn't match the exotic appearance. Third, the timing. The Italia hit the market just as Hudson was collapsing. Potential buyers worried about parts availability, dealer support, and resale value. Why take a chance on a car from a dying company when you could buy a Corvette, Thunderbird, or imported sports car from a stable manufacturer? Fourth, the quirks. The jet pipe taillights were polarizing. The structural rigidity issues meant the car didn't drive as well as it looked. And practical concerns, like the lack of a proper trunk in the two-seat configuration, limited its utility as a grand tourer. Finally, America just wasn't ready for this kind of car. The Italia was too expensive to be a sports car, too small to be a luxury car, and too unusual to fit any established category. It was a tweener, and the market had no patience for tweeners in 1954. The legacy today, the Hudson Italia, is one of the most collectible American cars of the 1950s. Of the 26 built, 21 are known to survive, a remarkable preservation rate that speaks to how special owners knew these cars were. A fully restored Italia can bring close to $600,000 at auction. Even driver-quality examples are worth over $250,000. One recently sold on Bring a Trailer for $98,700, despite being a barn find needing restoration. The Italia has appeared at prestigious events like the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance and regularly draws crowds at classic car shows. Collectors prize it not just for its rarity, but for what it represents. The last desperate gamble of a proud American manufacturer trying to prove they could still innovate and compete. Frank Spring died in a car accident in August 1959, just 5 years after the Italia's brief production run. Marshall Teague, the racing legend who'd helped make the Hudson Hornet a NASCAR champion, died in a crash the same year. The era of the independent automakers, Hudson, Nash, Packard, Studebaker, and the rest, was ending, squeezed out by the economies of scale and marketing power of the Big Three. The Italia stands as a monument to ambition, innovation, and bad timing. It was the right car at the wrong moment, built by a company that had run out of both money and time. Hudson created the most beautiful car they'd ever made, and America turned away. Not because the car wasn't good enough, but because Hudson itself wasn't strong enough to survive in the brutal automotive marketplace of the 1950s. The Hudson Italia reminds us that in the automobile business, timing is everything. You can have the most innovative design, the most beautiful styling, the most ambitious vision, and still fail if the market conditions aren't right. Hudson's mistake wasn't creating the Italia. Their mistake was developing the Jet in the first place, burning their last reserves on a compact car that didn't sell when they should have invested in a V8 engine and a redesigned Hornet. By the time the Italia arrived, it was already too late. But you know what? I'm glad they built it anyway. Because 70 years later, we can look at the Italia and see what might have been. We can imagine an alternate history where Hudson survived, where Frank Spring's vision led to a whole line of elegant, innovative cars that combined American engineering with European style. That didn't happen, but 26 beautiful examples exist to prove that someone tried. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen a Hudson Italia in person? Did your family own any Hudsons back in the day? What's your take on the company's decisions in those crucial early 1950s years? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. These conversations help keep the history alive and bring this community together. If you enjoyed this deep dive into automotive history, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss future episodes. And if you found this video valuable, give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know what content you want to see more of. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.